What's going on, workforce? Brian and Chris here, not necessarily in location. Thanks to you all for so much support over the last two videos where we got to film those together and in person. So we're going to be bringing more of those style videos to you guys here in the near future. But today we're actually talking about a few things. Quasi covered this in his video. I'm going to shout him out and tag him in his video about Blue Mage only battle royale as something that was tested in a recent Yoshi-P interview over here on Gamer. Now this is all translated via Google Translate, so we'll include links to these in the description. But we'd actually thought we'd start actually taking you all back in time to March 26, 2019, where Yoshi-P gave an interview talking about how he would love to make a battle royale game. We feel like maybe this is leading into with Quasi's video, the interview that's been given. Overall, like, this is starting to maybe put these pieces together, talk about future Blue Mage content as well. Chris, hopefully I summarized up what we're going to be talking about here in this video. I'm gonna leave it to you first to lead us in. What's going on here? What's your takeaway? We just watched Quasi's video together, and I thought there was some really interesting hopes there for Blue Mage.
Yeah, I think that in general, the requests that surround PvP, not necessarily from the group that maybe like PvP and are just looking for it to be more balanced, but from the group that maybe have wanted to be involved in PvP and haven't been able to find that invitation. Most of the requests have been more general for the community. Most of the requests, when you really dig down, they're just looking for something fun. They're like, hey, here's my suggestion, but if you find something else that's fun, that's fine too. And so I think Crystalline Conflict has answered that for a lot of people. But we have seen, like, hey, could there be more game modes that kind of just draw in and make it very casual and easy to hop in? And Battle Royale is one of those that has been widely successful across a number of titles. And Yoshi-P has referenced wanting to make a battle royale. This is the interview from 2019, where he also talks about wanting to work on a Diablo game at some point. And so we've heard him saying that he would love to, make a new MMO in his life. He would love to make something. And like if you go back and you look at these things from 2017, 2019 interviews, a lot of these things are things that come to be. So it's really important to pay attention to these things he wants to be, because Yoshi-P tends to be somebody who eventually, through just working 65 hours a day, gets what he wants. And so when he says, like, if you go back before we had a Final Fantasy 16 announcement, he said, I would love to make like a standalone Final Fantasy game at some point. And they're like, well, what would it look like? And he goes, oh, this is a 14 event. I don't want to talk about that here, but if it were, I think I'd like it to be a little more like high fantasy. I think I'd love for it to have a little more grit. I think he describes all these things.
Like amazing combat and summons. Like, oh, keep talking.
So you go back and you watch those and you're like, he was talking about 16, which he was already actively working on. So he was just, like the NDA lawyers are like, please don't breach. Please don't breach. Like he's just
somebody
slowly,
give him quiet.
The near dev actually got more. He was trying to get the near dev to accidentally reveal stuff, and he revealed a whole bunch of stuff. And he's like, wait a second, I was trying to get you to reveal stuff you weren't supposed to, and I think I did. So we've seen things come out of these different interviews and these different collabs over the years. The Japanese interviews are the better place, in my opinion, to get that stuff, because they tend to be more conversational, as opposed to the English ones are very much like, we ask this big lengthy question, it goes through a translator, it gets a big lengthy answer, and it's much more like a short essay back and forth, as opposed to this kind of like, what do you mean by that? And they can just have that conversation in the native tongue there. So this is the actual article, we believe, from Gamer. But I found it through Quasi's video that I watched this weekend, which is awesome. And like, there is a real question that we've asked. What do you do with limited jobs? Do you add more limited jobs? Do you expand on the system? And could we have other, like, if Blue Mage is not allowed in Ultimate, or if Blue Mage is not allowed in Deep Dungeon, or if Blue Mage is not allowed in PvP, could we get a Blue Ultimate, a Blultimate? Could we get, Blue Mage only PvP? Could we get these things where it's like, yeah, I understand why they're not allowed in the general population, but how fun would it be to have a mode that's just literally chaos? And this kind of answers a lot of that he's considering this.
The exploration of kind of like a mode that is Blue Mage, that is Battle Royale, and how you go and you find your abilities out in the open world sounds interesting. Like, it's on paper. Like, I think them adding it into Final Fantasy 14 would be interesting. The question that that immediately had when I was listening to kind of Quasi talk about this was, first and foremost, would it end up also then maybe being a standalone if it's successful? Like, if all of a sudden it's like, we've created this mode and it ends up being very successful, would we ever see a point where they just ended up breaking it off into its own thing? Because when you look at Final Fantasy XIV and the subscription model, and then you compare it to battle royales that are out there, the battle royale has a very low bar of entry as a free-to-play microtransaction driven game, where if they introduced it into 14 as just kind of a limited Blue Mage mode specifically, it could add some value. But my concern immediately is, well, I mean, is the PvP community big enough and hungry enough that it could sustain that level of support? One of the things we saw with 6.1 is right now the feast is kind of off in, retooling mode, and I hope they bring it back with some of the things that Crystalline Conflict really kind of hammered home. I like the 5v5 parties. I like how all that kind of like sits on together. They're also working on Rival Wings. So from a focus perspective, like I would say the PvP community within 14 has been limited naturally also and split out, so you have to use third-party tools, and having a narrower focus I think allows people to build up that interest in the mode itself. And then adding in a blue battle royale, then we see Crystalline Conflict and other modes suffer with all of these additions of modes on top of modes. Now don't misunderstand me, I would absolutely love to see what this would even look like. I would play it for sure. Like, this is exciting. But also the long-term player in me would say I would personally like to see Beastmaster. I'd personally like to see Puppet Master, because even on the PvE side of things, that's something that was hinted at the announcement of it, and we don't know what limited jobs are because we only have a picture that they are Blue Mage. And when you start to introduce new limited jobs, ultimately you can kind of see like what is their full vision for this system within this game system that's its own sub PvE system. Systems on systems, right? Stacks on stacks on stacks. But go ahead.
I think the limited job system pairs really well with open world content. So I would ask, I have a lot of questions about what they're going to do different with the Relic this time. The Relic is always iterative. Some iterations are further apart than others. So I'd love to know what they do with that. And that might justify, because a limited job, our one and only example, has told us like it doesn't have to be released with the expansion. It doesn't even have to be updated with the expansion. So like it can just be supported whenever they feel like it. It's very much standalone content. As for your like, what would the barrier to entry be? Well, they did lower the barrier to entry at some point by saying PvP is available at level 30. And we've got this separate PvP action system. And so as soon as you're level 30, you can get experience from it. You used to be able to get like your Frontlines roulette. You could do Frontlines roulette as many times as you want. It wasn't limited once a day. So like there were a ton of people that capped a lot of jobs back when that was made that way. From there, however, we then got into things where they would incentivize this. So things like, but not limited to, the current Garo event. When there is a desire to get something out of PvP, that's that extrinsic reward. I'm not doing it for fun. I'm doing it because I need X number of wins or X number of matches played. That's where you start to see, now there's something worth getting. And so there's something worth using bots, even if the bots aren't good. There's something worth using these various scripts. This gets well outside of like the add-on conversation into like just literal, they're not even at their computer. Or if they are at their computer, like it pressed limit break, they weren't even aware of it. So like, this is not like, oh, something popped up on their screen that says, hey, your limit break's ready. Like a weak auras. It's like, no, it's literally saying, hey, if you cast it now, it'll kill them. So I'm just going to do it for you. And so it's encouraged a lot of this bad behavior because people, they want that win. And so as a result, we did have a round of win trading where people were basically creating free trial accounts and then we're selling, hey, we'll run our free trials in. If they get banned, they get banned. We don't care. They'll run matches against you and lose for your benefit. And you pay us either in-game or out-of-game resources. And so as a result of that, all free trials are not allowed in PvP. So when you say like, would this battle royale maybe lower the barrier to entry? I would say that so far the barrier was already being lowered to the point where we as a community could not be trusted with it going any lower. So it actually went down, and then, we can't have nice things, and it had to actually take a step back in the less accessible direction, in that like we have to at least have somebody paying. I don't know, maybe it's included, like I would love to see the game slowly move closer to like what World of Warcraft does, where basically you get access to legacy expansions just with paying us up. You don't buy anything. So getting away from the complete edition and just maybe selling only Endwalker, and the Endwalker is complete edition, and you get access to maybe all the way up to Shadowbringers or all the way up to Stormblood, which is a subscription, which would also mean that if you have an active subscription, you get access to this Blue Mage PvP. But that's kind of an adjacent topic.
Yeah. The my other thing is that when it comes down to Blue Mage Battle Royale, Battle Royale tends to be something also very streamable, very content consumption.
Sure.
in its nature. That's one of the things that, like as a Halo fan, like as somebody who's looking forward to seeing what Halo's Battle Royale looks like, I actually enjoyed the last part in standing mode. I think Halo Infinite needs a lot of work, especially in terms of progress. That's the only downside. It's like when I bring up some of the positive things that Halo Infinite does, it's always overshadowed by some of the negative. But when it comes down to it, arena PvP isn't necessarily a massive draw in terms of like content creation and viewership, and Battle Royale has shown time and time again that it's something that really does bring in a whole different type of audience that's looking for that kind of content itself. And that could also, like when we talk about like Ultimate or Blue Ultimate, Blue Ultimate or something like that, while we as a community are still even debating, should there be a world's first race or not? Should it be televised and publicized and more? Or is that something that we just don't ultimately care about? Like the community ultimately is going to have to decide the fate of that, because right now we don't technically have a world's first race. We have a public world, a race to world's third or fourth, depending on, however many private, groups are running versus public. But the when it comes down to it, like it could be something that drives in a lot of attention to the game, helps sustain itself during its more slower times where people are waiting for content and story, and having something like that's been described to me in this case is interesting. Now, that being said, like I still wish there was a curated version of Blue Mage that could go into PvP. Like you go in, and just like with all PvP, it's really its own thing, right? White Mage in PvP is not a White Mage in PvE.
It's not.
And having a Blue Mage being able to step into PvP with a curated set of skills, yes, it's not going to be that full-on identity of what a PvE Blue Mage is, but maybe it would be fun just to like, yeah, I'm on Blue Mage and I want to PvP, and here are my abilities and my spells. Okay, that's what I have, right? So you could almost... Go ahead.
Just remember, Crystalline Conflict does not allow more than one of a class on a team.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make Blue Mage too appealing, you end up with wait times.
Like Black Mage?
You end up with wait times.
Oh, yeah. But it's still like, outside of it being too appealing, it should just be, hey, this is a caster kind of class within PvP. You can play it. And I would honestly go that far within like something like Deep Dungeon and Crystal Tower, Heaven on High, where it's like, okay, like if we have these curated set of spells and abilities, maybe that's just something that you can kind of play around with. It gets complicated because the progression of Heaven on High and Deep Dungeon, Palace of the Dead, they are scoreboards tied to it. There's obviously challenges tied to it. So I could see how those could be far less, but I could see Blue Mage in PvP. Yeah, Blue Mage in PvP would need to be could actually be something that would be on the table. But then if they're thinking of a battle royale for just Blue Mages, that'd be interesting. That would be fun. That'd be hell of a lot of fun. I don't know if it would be sustainable. I don't think it would be something that would draw a lot of people to actually come and play Final Fantasy XIV. I don't see that being like, oh, well, they finally added the Blue Mage Battle Royale mode that I've been waiting to play this game for.
Blue Mage PvP is all I ever wanted.
That was all I ever wanted, and now it's here, so I guess I have no excuse but to play. But it would be something that would be interesting in terms of just like offering another, line. The only concern, like I said, is that splitting up the PvP that exists right now and end up being something where it's like nobody runs, front lines anymore. Nobody does this anymore because that's where you go.
It could also be a seasonal rotating thing, right?
Oh,
the Mass Carnival could say, hey, the it's available, and so it's only here like every other week or once per patch cycle for 2 weeks or something like that, like a Moogle Tombstone event, but it comes around more regularly. And then you could say like, hey, during this Battle Royale event, one of the things about Deep Dungeon and PvP is that they're not perfect samples, but they are the closest to sampling something with no job boost, where you get access to stuff even though you haven't done the job quests. And so you could say, and everybody's going to get these Blue Mage abilities.
Yeah.
And so everybody's got the same ones. So you could easily have it be kind of adjusted, so it's like, wow, that's weird, everybody got Final Sting, this is just chaos. But the next season there is no Final Sting. It just changes. Now we're all fish throwing at each other. So like there's a lot of options on how to balance it so that people don't feel like you have to go collect.
Yeah.
You don't want it to feel like this Destiny. That's one of my issues with the Destiny PvP, is that there's this very much like haves and have-nots. as opposed to like instead you said, hey, everybody gets access to this legendary, and this is where you go farm it. Then you would say like, oh, cool, I'm gonna go get that weapon after this because I had a lot of fun with it in PvP, and the whole time I was like, man, I wish I had this in PvE. I'm gonna go earn it for that. So it kind of becomes this introduction to what the Blue Mage spells might be, because I think a lot of people start down the Blue Mage spells if they ever start, and then they don't get them all in one go, and then you kind of fall off farming them. But if it exposed you to one of the spells you were missing and you're like, that spell is so fun, how do I get that? Then all of a sudden you might see a farm pop up where there's party finders going, okay, well, let's go get that spell. And hopefully, like, you talk about visibility being one of the components here. I think for a long time, there's been a very valid thing to, we don't need visibility. We're just going to make a good game and we're proud of it. We don't need that. I don't need the validation. We're proud of what we do. Our community's proud of what we do. That's enough.
Right.
I will say the counterpoint to that is that when Yoshi-P sat across from us, speaking of a 2019 interview, when Yoshi-P sat across from us in the Shadowbringers Media Tour, and you and I asked him as one of our questions, hey, you just revealed the trust system. What would you guys ever consider taking this backwards compatible? And he told us to our faces, back when things were done in person, no, there's no way. The resources do not exist to make a system like this backwards compatible. It's just impossible. So I just want to put a stop to that.
Right.
Then we had a huge influx of players. The new player experience became a hampering thing, and he had resources to throw at it.
Spare no expense.
Spare no expense.
Yeah.
And they rebuilt the trust system so that it was accessible by more devs, and then they took the, now this more wider reaching set of devs and said, okay, now more people can use this system. Let's go ahead and make this backwards compatible. And so it is possible that more visibility, as long as they maintain kind of their stances on things and they still feel they're making the game they're proud of, more visibility can be a very, very good thing.
How wild would it be if also then this statement that he wants to make a new MMO before he dies was also the Final Fantasy, as he's talked about in the past, where at some point the number 14 doesn't make sense. And literally he's just like, oh, by the way, we're just it's 14 and it's also turns out 17 or 18 or whatever. Like if they want to continue with the numbering in the Final Fantasy, it's like, I always said I wanted to make a new one. Turns out it's the same one, but it's new. But, like how wild would that be? Because he talked about just the pain. Because, later from this interview, like, yeah, he wants to make one, but the pain it would take to try and shift people off of 14 onto the new one. And then and maybe the answer ends up being where it's like, well, why bother with that? Let's just name it a new thing. And we've got the trust system. We've gone through and over the course of time, re-gutted it, reworked it, and like you never noticed it. And then we hit a switch and all of a sudden graphic update, like we know that's already coming and on its way. So
he does think that the number 14 is going to be weird when there's a 16 and a 17 and a 20 and a 32, right? He's aware that number is going to age out. The problem is you've got all that SEO rank. Right. So to drop the number to make it, Final Fantasy Infinite or whatever is going to hurt them. So they're in this weird spot where a decision they made in the past is something they're just now living with. I think the test there, and once again, there's a whole other topic, but I think the test there is if the Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14 are under one subscription, and you start to say, okay, now these seasonal MMOs complement each other, and you maintain monthly active user all year round for both, because people that get, hey, I just want to take a break from 14 are like, you know what, I'm really enjoying 11. I don't want to play it all the time, but I'll play it during the times I'm not playing 14.
Exactly.
Now you're like, okay, well then let's plug Final Fantasy 20 in there as another MMO or whatever, and now you've got these 3 MMOs and it becomes this big value proposition.
Speaking of 11, just as a kind of note, I just posted my video on getting 11 to run on your Steam Deck. So cool. I've got it configured, got the controller set up and all that, and it plays like a freaking dream. So like, I'm living in this great world right now where like, like all these games, I think somebody's wanting me to get Guild Wars 2 running on it now. So I'm gonna see if I can't get Guild Wars up and running on it as well. Cause then all of a sudden it's like continue those evening grinds while I, catch up on YouTube or do a Netflix show with Julie. So it is
final ahead of you in the Omni race. So.
Congratulations! I still state that, I still believe that you're going to beat me. We'll have to see if I end up getting any kind of second win where I'm just like grind. But right now,
every other week being a lore week is the one counterpoint.
Just chipping away. I'm just chipping away at it a little bit. I got a warrior to 90, working on Gunbreaker. And then I'm going to see if I can't knock out some of these melee jobs. But maybe the Asadara, the Beast Tribe quest will help out a little bit starting tomorrow. So I think that's going to be exciting. Chris, any final thoughts on these subjects at hand?
No, just thanks again to Quasi for covering it. You know, I've been watching a lot of his coverage lately, and he's just done a great job being in touch with all of the different parts of the community and representing them really. I don't know, it just makes me feel fun and makes me feel like I like the community. So yeah, that's it.
All right, guys. For Brian and Chris, thanks for watching this one. We'll hopefully see you in our next one. But until then,
Take care.